Clothing, a social history. We are discussing about clothing, how clothing changed due the course of history. Cloth is very important because it is a part of our life. Everyone wears some dress or some cloth, and in all the society almost, they have certain rules. Some may be quite strict, that what men, women and children should dress like. That is, they define the identity of people. If someone is wearing a turban, you will identify him as a Sikh. All these dresses, they shape our notions of grace and beauty. That is, the ideas of the modesty and shame. But as the time changed, society changed, these notions or this way of dresses or clothing also changes or changed. And the emergence of modern world also changed the clothing dramatically. So we will talk about the 19th and 20th century, that is the modern period clothing. Why are these centuries important? Why we are talking about this century? First of all, this was the age of democratic revolutions, and also the capitalist markets evolved. Development of capitalist market in the 18th century in Europe, and most people would dress according to their regional codes or ethics. That is, the clothes which are available in their region, and also the cost of the material defines what they are going to wear. And on the basis of what class they belong, what gender they have and the status in their social hierarchy, the clothing styles are strictly regulated. And after the 18th century, as Europe colonized or European countries colonized most of the world, these democratic ideals and the industrial society also enhanced, and this completely changed the idea of dressing and its meaning. People could use styles and materials because there are different mix of cultures now. The European culture of dress and the colonial culture, or the colonies where they ruled. So the culture and locations also mattered, and this is how the Western dress styles for men were adopted worldwide. So we'll see, because we have already learned about French Revolution, how it transformed the political and social life, and also the dress codes. That is, the revolution swept away, condemned, or you can say it, after the revolution there was no laws for the dress codes. Previously, sumptuary laws were there. So what were these laws, and how these laws were vanished, or were, you can say, this revolution ate this law. So sumptuary laws and social hierarchy. In medieval Europe, dress codes were sometimes imposed upon the members of different layers of society. So there were actual laws for that. That is, if this is the hierarchy, what these people are going to wear are decided by them. So there are the laws being defined, and these laws were strictly regulated and followed also. From 1294 to the time of the French Revolution in 1789, everyone was, or especially those inferior sector, should follow the sumptuary laws. That is, this law tried to control the behavior of certain class. They want to prevent them from wearing certain clothes or consuming certain foods or beverages, especially alcohol, and hunting games. These items of clothing a person could purchase per year was also regulated, that you cannot purchase more than that. And not only by income, but what social rank you have in this sumptuary law scheme. The material of the cloth was also being defined. Only royalty can wear materials like ermine and fur and silk, velvet and brocade. Others, no, they were debarred from these type of expensive materials. So French Revolution, as I just said, that this ate away the sumptuary laws, so they ended the distinctions. As we have seen the Jacobin clubs, they called themselves as sans-culottes. They wanted to distinguish themselves from the aristocracy. Because the aristocracy would wear fashionable dresses like knee breeches. And this sans-culotte literally meant without knee breeches. Now everyone the people who were sans-culottes, or they were referring them to be, they were wearing, men and women, all they were wearing was the cloth that gave them comfort. And also the color, French color, the tricolor, blue, white and red, this became very popular because it marked the patriotism in the people. And there are other political symbols also, like the red cap people were wearing for liberty, long trousers and the revolutionary cockade that is pinned on their hat. This is the equality idea they wanted to portray, that is, they were clothing very simply. Simplicity of clothing is their idea of equality. So we have certain word here, like the cockade, that is cap usually worn on one side, and ermine, this is again a type of fur. If you see here, this is an upper class couple. See what they are wearing. Everything is well, you can say, dressed, designed, and they have a different kind of material they used for dresses they made. Then we talked about the tricolor. This is the women of the middle class wearing a tricolor dress. Here we have volunteers during the French Revolution, and here is the distinction between two, an aristocratic couple, and here a sans-culotte family. You can see the difference in the clothes they are wearing. Then the clothing and notions of beauty. Now, sumptuary law did end, but the European societies, they can easily wear in any way. But the French Revolution had raised the question of equality also, and it wanted to end the aristocratic privileges and those laws maintained by these privileges. But the distance or difference between these social, hierarchy people, it remained. Poor people could not dress like rich. They cannot eat same food. But there is no law now. The law is not going to say anything. Now what they are earning, sumptuary laws were ended, but what they are earning, this defined the rich and the poor people, what they are going to wear. So the notion of what was beautiful, ugly, proper, improper, and decent and vulgar, this actually differed. If you see, I'll show you a picture of a girl. She is wearing a very tight dress. And what was the reason? If you see, most of the women are wearing this dress, and this girl at a very tender age is supposed to wear this. So style of clothing, it has emphasized difference between men and women. In Victorian England, the women, as you see here in the childhood, were supposed to be docile, dutiful, submissive and obedient. And they also think that the ideal woman should have an idea of bearing pain and suffering. And men, they were supposed to be serious. They were assumed to be or expected to be strong, independent, aggressive. And women, frivolous, delicate, passive and docile. So this also reflected in their clothing. If you see, from childhood, this girl was tightly laced up and dressed in stays. So stays is a support as part of women dress to hold the body straight. So the effort was to restrict their growth of body, that means they don't get obese, also contain them within small molds like these dresses. When the girl get older, she has to wear corsets. So tightly laced, small, twisted women were admired as attractive, elegant, and graceful. So this clothing played a part in creating the image of frail, submissive Victorian women. But how does women react to this? Many women, because they are fed like this, they are in this society, so they think that this dress is okay for them. But not all. This torture and pain, they just accept it as normal, but not all. By the 1830s, women in England began agitating for democratic rights, the suffrage movement, that is the right to vote, that is suffrage. Suffragettes wanted the right for women to vote. So as this suffrage movement developed, many would want the reforms for dress also. That is, these tight dresses, people are, or the women especially, are in this side that they cause deformities and illness among these young girls, because their bodies are restricted. The body growth will be restricted, and this also hampered blood circulation. The muscles remained underdeveloped, and also at a later age their spines got bent. And most of the doctor, they were subjected to, or they come across this kind of complaint every now and then. So these are all the sources that says us that what we are learning is quite true. So there are certain words. Busk, that is a strip of wood, whalebone or steel in front of the corset to stiffen and support it. Then pabulum, anything essential to maintain life and growth. So this was the story of England. But what was happening in America? If you see, this is a picture of a woman who is wearing a very you can say big gown, and this is touching the floor. Can you imagine how she will be able to move or cook or take care of her kids? Very difficult. So this in America also, there was long skirts people were wearing, women were wearing, and this swept the ground and collected the filth and dirt, and this caused illness. And these skirts were so voluminous, it was so difficult to handle, and if they want to work or earn, this hampered this. So reform of this dress would change the position of the women. That is, if the dress is convenient and comfortable, they can go and earn their livelihood. In 1870s, National Women's Suffrage Association, which is headed by Mrs. Stanton, and the American Women's Suffrage Association, dominated by Lucy Stone, they both campaigned for the dress reform. And the argument was simple: just simplify the dress, shorten the skirt, and abandon the corsets. So on both sides of the Atlantic, that is on the right side we see England, on the UK, on the right side we see USA. Both places the movement for rational dress reform was going on. Now the reformers faced ridicule and hostility. Some tried to go ahead, but because of the persistent attacks, they just stepped back. By the end of 19th century, things changed. Why this changed? Because there were a variety of pressures. Though those times came with new values. And what are these times? New times. What are the reasons for the dress change? Most of these many of these changes were possible in Britain because of the introduction of new materials and technologies. Right? This would change the because of the new working condition for women, because they need to work, or they are working, they can't wear those dresses. So we'll just talk about what happened. So before the 17th century, women in Britain, they possessed a very few clothes made of flax, linen and wool. Very difficult to clean these kind of dresses. But by 1600, when Indian trade started, this bought cheap and easy to maintain Indian shinds, and this reached European countries also, and this increased the size of their wardrobes. Now during the Industrial Revolution in 19th century, Britain started manufacturing a lot of cotton and also exporting it to India. But when it is exporting to other countries, that is wider section of people in Europe, they were very much liking this cotton. And by the earlier 20th century, artificial fibers also, means the cloths which are made up of artificial fibers, they also came into picture because they were easy to maintain and wash. And in the late 1870s, heavy restrictive underclothes, this which has created such a storm in the pages of Women magazine, also were discarded. Clothes are now lighter, shorter and simpler. There's a word came, chins, cotton cloth printed with designs and flowers. So from the Hindi word chind. So we have two pictures here. If you see, this picture is showing the skirts being taken up by these women, and these skirts became shorter and frills also were done away with. And here you see women working because of the First World War. Women started working, or they have to work in the different factories. Now if they are able to work, they have to change the clothing styles also. By 1915, the hemline of skirt rose dramatically to mid-calf. It was not until 1914 it happened here. But why this happened suddenly? Because of the war. The changes in women clothing was brought up because of World War. Now many European women, they just stopped wearing jewelry, luxurious clothes, and also upper class women, they intermingled, or they mixed with the other class. So the dress also mixed. The clothes got shorter, as I showed you in the picture, during the First World War, 1914 to 1918, because of necessity. By 1917, over 700,000 women in Britain were employed in ammunition factories. And this working uniform was blouse and trouser and just a scarf on top of it, and later replaced by khaki overall and caps. Also the bright colors they just stopped using it as the war dragged on, and thereby the cloth became plainer and simpler. Skirts became shorter, and also women started wearing trousers, and then women also started cutting their hair just for convenience. By the 20th century, the dress which are plain, subtle, these style came into, you can say, reflect seriousness and professionalism. School dresses, because school dresses also people wanted to have a plain dressing, and they just in the school they discouraged the ornamentation. Women were now into gymnastic and games, so they need to wear the clothes which are suitable for this game, which are comfortable and convenient for them. So this is the history of clothing, how this is linked to the history of society. And if you see that because of certain changes, because of the people mindset, or you can say the changes because of the war, or women started going to work, this all changed. Now we see a different dresses. How it changed with time in the Western world, that is Europe. What were the transformations in the colonial India at the same period? What about India? Significant changes were there as far as clothing of male and female is concerned. during the colonial period. And because of the missionary activity, the Western dress, different forms of Western dress, people came into influence of this. And these fashion clothing styles also embodied an indigenous tradition and culture. And this also became the symbols, important symbols of the national movement, means against the British rule. So how does it change? Let us see the transformations. When the Western world clothing came into India, now how do these Indians reacted? So we need to understand three things or three different ways in which Indians reacted. First was, many, especially men, they actually incorporated some good elements, or you can say some elements that they liked Western style clothing in their dress. It started all with the wealthy Parsis of Western India. These were the first among all of these to adopt or to adapt the Western style clothing. If you see here, these are the Parsis in Bombay, and they are wearing the trousers and the hat that is feta. So they added these trousers and feta to along with the long collarless coats with boots, and also to look a gentleman, they took a walking stick. So this is how they showed or sign of modernity and progress they showed. Those who converted to Christianity, those Dalits, they were very much attracted with the Western style clothing. And this was their idea of liberation. That is, they are liberated from all the caste and creed system. So that is how here also men are more affected to the new dress styles. The second way in which the Indians reacted to these new modern style of Western dresses, there were some who were convinced that this Western culture will affect the cultural identity, traditional cultural identity, and they might lose it. So the way or the use of Western clothes was taken as a sign of world turning upside down. That is, if you see the cartoon of this Bengali Babu, this is mocking him. He is wearing Western style boots and hats and everything, but he is in his dhoti. So this is how second type of people reacted. And the third were in dilemma that whether they want to wear it, whether they don't want to wear it, they don't want to lose the Indian ones also. So they find an intermediary idea or a balance. Now they would do what? They would go to the office or wherever they want. They will wear these Western style clothes. But whenever they come home, they just change their clothes to the comfortable Indian clothes that they generally wear at home. So this is how third way of reacting to the Western style. If you see here, this is a very famous cartoon, The Modern Patriot. A person who is wearing all the Western style clothes, but he still believes that the motherland is in his heart. So all these were going on. People were wearing it, and some notes and sources are also there. As I said, there need to be a solution. People try to find solution that what they should adopt, what not. But there are certain changes of clothing that have a very turbulent or not very good history. There were caste conflict, and if the dresses are changed or if the dressing style is changed. So in the European world, as we just saw, the sumptuary laws, they were not there now after the French Revolution. But in India, there were rules, strict rules. There were strict social code of conduct for food and dress. There in the caste system, it was clearly laid down rules, defined that what subordinate or dominant caste Hindus should wear, eat, and what the others shouldn't. Okay, so if someone of the, say, the person who is low in the hierarchy of the caste system, if he changes his clothing styles, then there will be violent social reactions. I'll give an example. We'll talk about Shanars. They were called as Nadars later on. So in May 1822, this women of Shanar caste, they were attacked by Nayars. Nayars in public space. There was a princely estate of Travancore. Why? Because these women started wearing or covering their upper bodies. And this violent conflict went on. Why? The Shanars, as I said, they were later known as Nadars. They were considered to be a lower caste or subordinate caste. They were not allowed to even take umbrella, wear shoes, or any gold ornaments. So they were laid down rules for what they are to be doing in front of the Nayars, etc. That is, they are not able to cover their upper bodies before the dominant caste. But when the Christian missionaries came under their influence, Shanar women, when they converted, they actually, in 1820s, it happened, they tailored blouses and clothes to cover their upper body. Some Hindu reformers also helped them, like Ayya Vaikundar. There were some who were the social reformers, they actually helped. But when Nayars came to know that, they did what? This thing. They attacked them, and that just tore off the women clothing in the public place, right? And also complaints were filed in court against the dress change, because they don't want this free labor to go. Shanars were free labor for them. At first, government of Travancore it issued a proclamation that, just to Shanar women in 1829, please abstain from covering the upper part of the body. But Shanar Christian women, especially, they adopted the blouse and upper cloth. And after the abolition of slavery in Travancore in 1855, this even led to more frustration among the bigger castes or dominant caste, because they thought that they are losing control on these Shanars. In October 1859, the riots broke out as Shanar women were attacked in the public marketplace and they were stripped off. Houses were looted and chapels burned. So government issued another proclamation permitting the Shanar women, whether the Shanar women are Christian or Hindu, to wear a jacket, cover their upper bodies, but not in the manner how the women of high caste would do. When it comes to British rule and dress code, how did the British react to Indian ways of dressing, and how did Indian reacted to British attitudes? Means, what was the action and what was the reaction? See, there was a confusion. There was a misunderstanding, because the Britishers or their clothing and the Indian clothing were conflicting. The ideas were conflicting. We'll take an example of turban and a hat. Now, when European traders began coming to India, they distinguished the Indian as the turban wearers. Okay, they can't distinguish first that turban is different from the hat, and the two headgears, they are quite different. The turban is used in Indian subcontinent especially to protect the body and the head from the heat, but it cannot be removed all the times. See, this turban is very important as far as Indian community is concerned, especially the rural areas. And there was a cultural difference. It was actually not a cultural difference, it was a misunderstanding. Because the British, they got offended because the Indian wouldn't take off the turban in front of colonial officials. So, this is about the regional identity and national identity for the Indians, and the British couldn't understand that. If you see, I'll just give you an idea of Sir M. Vishweshwaraya. He was a leading engineer and technocrat, and he was a Diwan of Mysore from 1912 to 1918. He is wearing a three-piece suit here, but still he is having a turban on his head. And if we go on, let me show you this picture. These are the people, you can say European people. Now they are wearing hat, and this hat is very different from the hat being the other people who are wearing the hat. This is somewhat different. This is the difference in the culture of wearing hat and the ideas about this hat or the turban. I'll give you one more idea of the conflict, that what happened here. At the beginning of the 19th century, it was customary for British officials to follow certain Indian etiquette, and they removed their footwears in the courts of ruling kings or chiefs. The Britishers would do it. And some British officials also wore Indian clothes. But in 1830, Europeans were forbidden from wearing Indian clothes at official functions, so that the cultural identity of the white masters should not be undermined. So as I was saying, that Indians were expected at that time to wear Indian clothes. They were not allowed to, the people were not interested. British people were not interested that Indians should wear all these Western clothes. They want them to wear the Indian dress code. So in 1824 to 1828, Governor General Amherst, he insisted that Indians should take off their shoes if they appeared before him, or any British official, but it was not strictly followed. But by the mid-19th century, Lord Dalhousie, he was a governor general, and he, for the shoe respect, that is to remove the shoe off, he made it stricter. And Indians were actually forced to take off their shoes if they want to enter the government institution. Only the European cloth wearing Indians were exempted from this rule. But many Indians were uncomfortable. They can't just remove their shoes everywhere they go. So there is a famous case of this defiance of this shoe respect in Surat courtroom. Manakji Kowaji Anti, an assessor, he was working in the Surat Fajdari Adalat, that is the court. He just refused to take off his shoes in the court of session judge. But the judge says, he insisted, no, you have to take it off, take these shoes off. And this is because the Indian way of showing respect to superior is to take off their shoes. But Manakji, he said no. So he was bad entry in the courtroom, and he later sent the letter to the governor of Bombay as a protest. So the British insisted that because the Indians have the custom to take off their shoes at sacred place, at home, why aren't they taking it off in the courtroom? These controversies went off. Indians said, they urged that these shoes are being taken off at the sacred places, and our home, it is different from the taking off the shoes at other places like courtroom. The problem is of dirt and filth. Shoes has dirt. So dirt cannot be allowed into places where it is clean, like the Indian homes, because people sleep there. They eat their food on the ground. And also the leather, because it is made of leather. Leather is also filth. Okay. And these public buildings, as far as Indians are concerned, they are just public building. Everyone is coming, so it's not clean. So it took so many years before shoes were permitted into the court. So this all went on. So then came the national movement, designing the national dress. By the late 19th century, this nationalist feeling, it flowed across India. Now, Indians started devising the cultural symbol for expressing the nation unity. Artists, they looked for national style of art. Poets started writing national songs. So there were debate about the national song, the national flag, and there were the search for national dress also. What will be the cultural identity of the people and the symbol of nationalism? And there were some other people like the self-conscious experiment were made. Dress engaged men and women of upper caste and caste in many parts of India. If you see the Tagore family, this is a Tagore family picture, Bengal, they experimented different dress. So Rabindranath Tagore suggested that instead of combining the Indian and European dress, why not to combine, it is better to combine the Hindu and Muslim dress. So the chapkan, that is the long button coat, is better suitable for men. This Rabindranath Tagore said. Here I am just showing this Janana, the name is quite difficult. So it is Janana Dana Dindini. So it's Gyanandani basically, no? So this is in English it is written. So we can just write it as Gyanandani Tagore. And her husband, Satyendranath Tagore. These are other family members, and if you see, she is wearing a Brahmika sari with a blouse, a model on a western gown. So when Gyanandani Devi actually did these changes, she adopted the Parsi style of wearing this sari like this. If you see here, pinned to the left shoulder with a brooch and worn with blouse and shoes. Brahma Samaj and other women of different, you can say, area or region, they also adopted it. The style gained acceptance before long among Maharashtrians, Uttar Pradesh Brahmos and non-Brahmos. If you see, this is a picture of Sarla, daughter of R.C. Dutt. Here she is wearing Parsi bordered sari with high collared and sleeved velvet blouse, showing how clothing style flowed across different regions and cultures. She is Lady Bachchu Bai, a well-known Parsi social activist. If you see, she is wearing a silk gara embroidered with swans. These are swans and peonies, a common English flower. Brahmo Samaj, those people who are belonging to Brahmo Samaj are called Brahmo. But these attempts were not pan-India. People or women from Gujarat, Kodagu, Kerala, Assam, they continue to wear different sari. Here is a picture of Maharani of Travancore, and you see she is wearing western shoes and a modest long sleeve blouse. And this style has become common among the upper caste by the 20th century. Then came the Swadeshi movement. We have seen about this, that because Indian textile were very famous and India was covering for the export around 1/4 of the world good at that time. But India was giant at that time as far as textiles are concerned. Only in Bengal there were a million viewers. Only a million viewer only in Bengal in 18th century. But the industrial revolution in Britain, when the things were automated, that is spinning and weaving, it increased the demand of raw material like cotton and indigo. And this also changed the status of India, because India was known for different things. So political control also helped Britishers when they came to India. They expected and they forced the peasants to grow indigo, and also cheap British manufacture easily replaced coarser Indian one. And when the Indian weavers and spinners, they were confronted with the British manufacture or British produce which is coming to India, they were just jobless. So important textile weaving centers like Murshidabad, Machilipatnam and Surat, they just went down, declined as demand fell. So large number of people at that time, because of the movement going on, boycotted British and mill-made clothing. But if you see that the way it was so good at that time, the British made cloth, and it was comfortable also. It couldn't be done totally. In 1905, Lord Curzon decided to partition Bengal, that was called Bang Bhang, in order to control the growing opposition to British rule, because the opposition was streaming up. And this Swadeshi movement developed because as a reaction to this measure of Lord Curzon. So people were urged by the leaders to boycott British goods and also start manufacturing like matchboxes and cigarettes in their own home. Or the colonial rule where there were mass protests, and it was assumed that the use of khadi is a patriotic duty, and women were also told or requested to just throw away silks and glass bangles, and they must use shell bangles. So this is how things went on, and the change of dress actually started appealing upper caste rather than those who had made to do less and could not afford the new product. So after 15 years, many among the upper caste also returned to wearing European dress, Western dress. So this nationalism went on, but it was, as I said, it was impossible to compete the cheap and better British goods, which was already flooding the market. But Mahatma Gandhi also did various things, and as a symbolic weapon, he used cloth against British rule. So here is a very famous picture, a familiar image of Mahatma Gandhi. He is bare-chested and he is spinning at his spinning wheel. So the most familiar image, as you see here, is this one, and he made spinning on the charkha and daily use of khadi, and he said that these are certain powerful symbols, and this will make us self-reliant, and also as a resistance to the British mill-made cloth. This is what Gandhiji's idea was. So Gandhiji did a lot of experiment, clothing. As a boy from Gujarati Baniya family, if you see, he usually wore a shirt with a dhoti and pajama and sometimes a coat. But he went to London as a boy in 19 years of age in 1888. He dressed Western suit. On his return, he continued to wear this Western suit and talked with a turban. And when he was a lawyer in Johannesburg, South Africa in the 1890s, he was still wearing Western clothes. But soon he decided that he should relieve himself from these Western clothes. That will be a very powerful political statement. He called it as dressing unsuitably. So in Durban in 1913, Gandhiji first appeared in a lungi and kurta, and as a mark of protest of shooting against Indian coal miners, he just shaved off his head. So on his return to India in 1915, he decided to dress like Kathiawadi peasant, and after 6 and 7 years, 1921, he adopted the short dhoti to form a dress he wore until his death. And then on 22nd September 1921, a year after launching the non-cooperation movement, which sought Swaraj in 1 year, and he said that I can't do what pressurize people if I can't do that thing. Means I cannot preach what I cannot do. So I will go about that what he said, but let me show you the picture of Mahatma Gandhi. He was age 7 here, and here he is aged 14. Just look what he is wearing. And here he is around 21. He is wearing the Western dress. Here also in Johannesburg 1900 in Western style dress, but in 1913 in South Africa, he is dressed as a mark of Satyagraha. So Gandhiji said, I propose to discard at least up to 31st of October my topi and vest, and content myself with the plain cloth and just a chadar whenever necessary to protect my body. Because I adopt the change, because I have always hesitated to advise anything I may not be prepared to follow. This is what he said. There is one more picture of Mahatma Gandhi with Kasturba shortly when he returned from South Africa. He is just dressed so simply. So at this time, he experimented for a month of 2 different dresses. But when he wanted, because it was his duty, he thought that to be among poor, and he just rejected the idea of Western clothing. And he wanted to dress and adopt the people who are Indian and poor. That is, he wanted to be like poorest Indian. Khadi, white and coarse, was him a sign of purity, a simplicity and poverty. So it was a symbol of nationalism according to him, and a rejection of Western mill-made cloth. So he wore short dhoti without a shirt when he went to England at a round table conference in 1931. So when he was asked that this is not suitable, then he said that I am wearing less clothes. The king is already having enough cloth for both of us. That is, he is wearing enough cloth, my cloth also. So not all were so much into Gandhiji's idea. That is, Mahatma Gandhi has a vision that his whole nation should follow khadi. And he said that if everyone wear khadi, that will erase the difference among the religion, caste, creed, etc. But not all were convinced, because the responses were somewhat different. I said not all, but means many were convinced, but not all. But there were some reasons. Like nationalist like Motilal Nehru, he was a successful lawyer, barrister from Allahabad. So he actually gave up the Western styled suit, but he adopted Indian dhoti and kurta. But this was not made up of khadi, but a coarse cloth, right? But these were not made up of coarse cloth. I'm just saying the coarse cloth was not used, which is actually khadi. It was nicely, a fine kind of cotton cloth he was wearing. Then, because those who were deprived, those people who think they are deprived by the casteism or caste norms for centuries, they were also attracted by the Western dress style. So unlike Mahatma Gandhi, there were other nationalists like Baba Saheb Ambedkar. He never gave up the Western style suit. And also many Dalits, they start wearing 1910s, they were wearing 3-piece suit. And this is a mark of their self-respect. Women also, they wrote that we cannot wear this because we are bound by the tradition, and there are things which are not very, you can say, in the society, not very applicable or not possible. And other women or nationalists like Sarojini Naidu and Kamala Nehru, they were also wearing the just colored saris and design instead of this white homespun which Gandhiji tried to spread. So these were the ideas of how the clothing changed with the change of time. We saw the Western world, what happened there in England and USA. Then we came to India and we saw how the things changed, what was there, and colonial Britisher rule, how the thing changed, what were the controversies, and then national movement, how it changed the dressing sense, and now we are wearing everything. So this is the Gandhi cap, just an example of Gandhi did a lot of experiment with the hats. This is Mahatma Gandhi with a turban. Here Mahatma Gandhi embroidered Kashmiri cap. Here he is wearing the Gandhi cap, and this is bare head. So this was about the clothing and history of clothing. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself.